He left her bleeding in the blizzard, told the pack she was too weak to live. But when the Alpha King found her half-frozen body, he didn't just save her. He claimed her, and that whisper, "You're mine now," unleashed a power no one saw coming. Hey, if you're loving this story, a quick like or subscribe goes a long way in helping me keep creating. And if you're up for it, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I read every message, and it always makes my day. They say a mate's rejection in the heart of winter is a chill deeper than death. But the truth bites sharper. It's the howling gale after his venomous decree, the crush of frozen judgment from your pack, and the dormant fire in your veins that he'd just condemned to eternal frost. The elder's rasp was a brittle thing, a splinter of sound in the wind-lashed hollow of our village. My fingers, chilled numb despite the fur-lined gloves, hovered over the blackened patches on his frostbitten hands, skin cracked like old ice, weeping clear fluid that smelled of iron and despair. Other pack members lingered at the edges of the gathering circle, their forms hunched shadows against the skeletal pines, their murmurs carried on gusts like shards of sleet. They never drew near when I worked, not anymore. "Breathe," I whispered to myself, letting the elder's frantic pulse flow through me, tasting his agony on the air. It was a sour, metallic bite, like blood laced with the tang of endless night. I was an empath, a soother of shattered edges. It was the only worth I had left to give. Because everything else about me was apparently eclipsed, stained by a shadow no amount of moonlight could bleach away. The salve I'd brewed from willow bark and thawed snowmelt was a cool slurry against my skin. Gently, so gently, I worked it into the wounds. The old wolf flinched, a tremor rattling through his frail frame, but he didn't pull away. Humans were harder than beasts in this frozen world. They carried grudges like hoarfrost, weighing every kindness against old fears. They didn't care that my mother had bled out under that blood moon eclipse, her life snuffed like a candle in the storm of my birth. They didn't know my father had howled into madness weeks later, vanishing into the white wastes, branded a shattered mind who couldn't face the omen he'd sired. Beasts just knew hurt, and they knew when someone ached to mend it. The elder's breathing eased, the frantic stutter of his heart steadying under my palm, a quiet mercy. It was all I claimed these days. Beyond the hollow, the pack's life clawed on. The scent of smoldering pine resin drifted from the central fire pit, a smoky tease of the winter solstice feast to come, roasted hare spiced with foraged roots, a rare warmth against the bite of the season. It was a night for revelation, a night for the moon goddess to pierce the longest dark and unveil the other half of your soul. For years, I'd clung to that right like a cub to its dam's flank. Maybe tonight, someone would truly see me. Not the outcast, not the empath who lingered in the gales' shadow, just Ilara. Was it so much to crave? To be chosen, to be warmed, to be held for more than the tragedy woven into my blood? As I bound the elder's hands in softened doeskin strips, my own chest tightened with a loneliness so vast it felt like the endless drift beyond the tree line, a physical hollow gnawing at the edges of my resolve. I was skilled at easing frost's cruel kiss on flesh and bone, but who eased the frost in me? I fit nowhere. A specter in my own den, a sigh lost to the wind, a half-remembered tale elders murmured to quiet restless pups. Beware the white wolf born of eclipse. She brings the thaw that drowns us all. The elder stirred, his rheumy eyes cracking open to fix on mine. Icy blue, like chips of glacier reflecting a sorrow I couldn't voice. "Moon's grace, girl," he croaked, his voice a dry scrape. "Your touch, it pulls the fire back in." I offered a faint smile, the kind that didn't reach my eyes, and reached for the tin cup of warmed broth I'd set by the firestones. But as I lifted it to his lips, a fresh gust hurled sleet across the hollow, stinging my fair skin like 1,000 needle pricks. My silver blonde hair, wavy as thawed streams, whipped free of its braid, frosting into brittle threads that caught the weak light like strands of fractured moonlight. I shivered, not just from the cold, the perpetual chill that seeped into my bones, no matter how many layers of wool and hide I piled on. It was as if the eclipse that birthed me had stolen the warmth from my veins, leaving only this quiet, unyielding freeze. Around us, the village hunkered low, dens burrowed into snow-mounded hillsides, smoke vents puffing defiant plumes into the slate-gray sky. Muffled howls echoed from the patrols circling the borders, warnings against rogue incursions or the shadow beasts that slunk in from the fractured kingdoms to the north. And there, faint but insistent, the distant toll of solstice bells from the Alpha's longhouse, ringing like funeral knells over the gale. Each peal twisted something in me, a yearning sharp as a thorn under snow. The legends said the goddess wove her strongest bonds under this endless night, when the auroras bled green and violet across the void, revealing mates whose souls could withstand the winter's wrath. I'd dreamed of it since I was old enough to shift, fleetingly, weakly, my rare white wolf form emerging only in moonlight, small and ethereal, her fur glowing like fresh powder. A sign of purity, the old tales whispered, or a curse of fragility, as my pack preferred. Either way, it marked me, shunned me. In a world carved by survival's blade, where weakness meant exile into the white death, my gentleness was a flaw they couldn't forgive, yet I couldn't stop the pull of it. As the elder sipped the broth, his delirium ebbing under my whispered lullaby, a fragment of a song my father once hummed, soft as falling flakes, I poured my empathy into the words. Sleep now, little storm. Let the winds carry your fears. The moon will cradle what the cold steals. His eyelids fluttered shut, a sigh escaping like steam from a crack in ice. Animals and elders were simpler. Their pains ran clean, untainted by the pack's layered cruelties. Pups, too, if I'd been allowed near them. But no, the mothers drew their young close when I passed, eyes narrowed against the eclipse taint that might freeze their bloodlines brittle. I rose, brushing snow from my knees, the wind tugging at my cloak like impatient fingers. The pack's brutal code echoed in every averted gaze, every hushed counsel where my name surfaced, only as caution. Keep the white wolf at arm's length, her thaw weakens the ice we stand on. Exile wasn't just a threat, it was the shadow over every breath. I'd seen it claim others, a limping hunter cast out, his howls fading into the drifts, a barren she-wolf vanishing under the Alpha's decree, her scent erased from the trails. And me? I lingered on the edge, useful enough to tolerate for my gift, but never woven into the warmth of the core. My den was a hollowed-out pine stump on the village fringe, its walls etched with my own carvings, lunar phases to chase away the dark. Nights there, I curled alone, my wolf whining softly in my chest, dormant and sealed, as if the eclipse had locked her fire behind walls of frost. Hope, though, that treacherous ember, flickered still. The solstice was hours away. Perhaps tonight, under the goddess's unblinking eye, the bond would ignite true. A mate who saw beyond the omen, whose touch could melt this endless winter in my soul. I turned toward the longhouse path, the bells tolling louder now, a summons laced with dread and dream. The sleet eased for a breath, the world holding still, as if the winds themselves leaned in to listen. Then, a crack, sharp as breaking bone, deliberate through the gathering blizzard. My head snapped up, breath snaring in my throat like a snare in wool. He emerged from the veil of flakes, striding with the unyielding grace of a predator born to the snows. Thorn Blackwood. The beta's presence cut the gale like a blade, his broad shoulders rolling under a cloak of midnight fur, golden eyes scanning the hollow with the cold precision of a tracker scenting weakness. His scent hit me first, pine resin sharpened by forged iron, laced with the raw earthiness of deep drifts and unyielding command. It slammed through me. A jolt, electric and searing, both terror and rapture in one frozen instant. The mate bond. It was no myth, no elder's fireside fancy, every whispered rite, every solstice prayer. It was real. For the first time, that distant hope sharpened into something I could almost grasp, a fragile warmth blooming in my chest against the storm's bite. Your gift is unexpected, he rumbled, his voice a low thunder that vibrated through the snow at my feet. He halted paces away, those amber eyes fixed not on me, but on the now sleeping elder, as if weighing the miracle I'd wrought. I didn't think the frost-kissed could be eased so swiftly. They're usually too far gone. I found my voice, small and frayed as a wind-torn banner. Pain blinds them, but kindness, it remembers the way back. My gaze lifted, tracing the hard line of his jaw shadowed by stubble, the confident set of his lips curved in perpetual assessment. He was even more commanding up close, the goddess's favor carved in every angle. The broad chest that spoke of battles won in blizzards, the tousled dark hair dusted with fresh snow. Why else would she tether me to him, if not as mercy? Thorn's eyes met mine then, and for a heartbeat that stretched eternal, I saw it, a flicker of bewilderment, pupils dilating as our scents truly entwined. The bond sang between us, a silent, thrumming melody only we could hear, pulling like auroral threads across the void. His stare pinned me, intense as a physical force, the air thickening with unspoken promise. But as swiftly as it flared, the recognition guttered, replaced by a cool, appraising sweep that trailed down my slender form, my woolen tunic patched with hide, my delicate hands still smeared with salve, and back up. It wasn't the gaze of a mate beholding his missing half. It was the scrutiny of a beta eyeing a crack in the pack's armor. It wasn't the gaze of a mate beholding his missing half. It was the scrutiny of a beta eyeing a crack in the pack's armor. The wind howled its approval, whipping snow devils across the hollow like mocking spirits. But I stood rooted, the bonds thrumming a counterpoint to the chill seeping deeper into my bones. Thorn's presence loomed, broad-shouldered and unyielding, his fur-trimmed leathers dusted with fresh flakes that clung to him like fealty oaths. Golden eyes, sharp as auroral blades, held mine without mercy, and in that suspended breath, my sealed wolf stirred faintly, a whisper of embers under glacial crust, vulnerable and alive with electric promise. This was it, the pull I'd chased through endless nights, a fated tie that could shatter my isolation, warm the frost-veined hollow of my chest. His ambitious aura crashed over me, pine sharpened by iron, laced with the unyielding command of one who clawed for power in our frozen world, and it confirmed everything. He was mine, or I his. The goddess's weave, unbreakable as permafrost. Yet as the seconds stretched, that warmth curdled at the edges. His appraisal lingered, traveling the length of my slender frame once more, from the frost-laced hem of my tunic to the delicate curve of my shoulders, as if cataloging flaws in a blade unfit for the hunt. The bond sang on, insistent and raw, but his expression hardened, the flicker of shared scent registering like a misstep on thin ice, acknowledged, then dismissed. Eclipsed frailty, he murmured, the words rough as gravel under boot, laced with a disdain that sliced cleaner than any claw. The pack whispers of your gifts, but look at you, slender as a willow in gale, unfit to stand beside one who must rise. I flinched, the sting blooming hot on my fair skin despite the cold, my silver blonde hair catching in the wind like threads unraveling. The bond recoiled with me, a dissonant twang that tasted of ash and betrayal. How could he speak so when the pull between us hummed like storm-lit veins? Thorn, I managed, my voice a fragile thread, soft-spoken as always, though it trembled now with the weight of exposed hope. The scent, the bond. It's real. The goddess. He cut me off with a low chuckle, devoid of mirth, stepping closer until his shadow engulfed me, the heat of his body a cruel tease against my perpetual chill. Up close, his arrogance was etched in every line, the square jaw clenched like a trap, the tousled dark hair framing eyes that gleamed with calculated ambition. Not wonder. Real? Aye, it's real enough. A burdensome alliance the moon saw fit to foist on me. His gaze flicked sidelong, toward the longhouse where shadows of enforcers moved like specters, Lyra Frost among them, her strong-willed form a silhouette of unyielding muscle and cold precision. I caught the hint of it then, a subtle alignment in his stance, the way his scent carried a faint undernote of her steel and snow aura. Political gain, whispered the wind. He'd tolerate this tie for appearances, weave it into his bid for Alpha's favor, but claim another to bolster his line. A mate is a mate, Alara Winter. But in these blizzards, strength isn't whispered lullabies to fevered elders. It's the blade that carves survival from the white death. Your eclipse-born softness, it weakens what I build. The words landed like sleet pellets, each one burrowing deeper, chilling the fragile ember I'd nursed for so long, my empathetic aura. That calm, healing energy that soothed the pack's wounds from afar faltered now, recoiling from him even as the bond tugged me inexorably closer. I tasted shame like bitter frost on my tongue, metallic and unrelenting, but I clung to the song between us, the silent melody of souls entwined, a lifeline in the gathering dark. Impressive, your empathy, he continued, his voice gravel rough, mocking the praise as he gestured vaguely at the sleeping elder. Pulling fire from frost-kissed flesh, a parlor trick for the weak. But what use in endless winter, when rogues claw at our borders and shadows stir from the fractured kingdoms? You'd melt under the first true gale, dragging my ambitions down with you. I stammered, heat flushing my cheeks despite the wind's bite. My icy blue eyes, mirrors of unspoken sorrow, lifting to meet his without flinching, though my heart hammered like a trapped bird. It's not weakness, Thorn. Pain makes us vicious, but kindness. It forges the pack stronger, heals what blades can't touch. The bond, it sings of more than survival, of balance. My words tumbled soft, laced with the earnest plea of one who'd spent years on the fringe, mending what others broke, only to be eyed as omen. Animals yielded to my touch, elders sighed in relief. Why couldn't he see that in me? That the white wolf within, dormant and pure, held a quiet power born of eclipse, not curse? His laugh barked again, sharper this time, drawing stares from the hollow's edges. Packmates pausing in their labors, their whispers slithering like ground frost. One, a grizzled hunter with scars like cracked river ice, leaned to his companion. Eclipse omens, they say, born under blood shadow, brings thaw that drowns the strong. The words planted like seeds in barren soil, doubt's first tendril coiling in my gut, but Thorn pressed on, undeterred, his golden eyes narrowing as if I'd voiced a challenge. Balance? Spare me your solstice tales, Omega. I've no time for frailty that feigns philosophy. The ceremony looms, and with it, choices that secure our future, not dilute it. He straightened, the fur of his cloak rippling like a dark wave, his aura swelling dominant and cold. Tolerate the bond for the right's sake. Appearances matter when eyes watch from the longhouse, but know this, Lyra's steel tempers what your whispers erode. She'd stand unyielding at my flank, not shatter like hoarfrost at dawn. The dismissal hung heavy, a physical weight pinning me as surely as his gaze, the bond's song twisting into a dirge of curdled hope. I wanted to scream, to demand he feel the electric vulnerability I'd bared, the way his pine iron scent had ignited something dormant, a faint stir of my sealed wolf like embers craving blaze. But my throat tightened, words dissolving into the wind, leaving only the ache of isolation sharpening to a blade's edge. He turned then, broad back a wall against me, striding toward the longhouse path without a backward glance, the snow swallowing his prints like secrets buried deep. I stood frozen long after, the elders' even breaths a mocking counterpoint to my fracturing resolve. The pack's murmurs swelled, a low rustle like dead leaves under ice, their pitying stares prickling my skin worse than sleet. "Eclipse girl," they breathed, the words unspoken but etched in every averted eye. "Omen of thaw and ruin." The subtle foreshadowing of their doubt wormed deeper, a chill that no salve could soothe, planting visions of the solstice, auroras bleeding across the void, the Alpha's invocation unveiling not union, but fracture. Numbly, I gathered my salves and strips, the wind tugging at my cloak like insistent fingers urging flight. My den waited on the village fringe, a sparse hollow in a snow-mounded pine stump, its walls scarred with lunar carvings I'd etched in lonely hours, chasing shadows with symbols of phases and promise. I retreated there as the light bled to bruise purple, the solstice bells tolling fainter now, a dirge blending with the howl outside my door. Inside, the air hung stale, scented of dried herbs and the faint, lingering tang of isolation. I sank onto the pallet of woven reeds and hides, drawing my knees to my chest, the slender frame that marked me frail curling small against the encroaching dusk. Replaying the encounter was torment, his gravel-rough voice praising only to mock, the hardening of his golden eyes as he reduced our sacred tie to a political tether, Lyra's shadow lurking in his words like a blade at his belt. The bond still hummed, a traitorous warmth in my veins, but now it curdled, hope twisted to something bitter, laced with the fear that he'd always see me as the eclipse's stain, not its gift. Curled there, silver blonde hair spilling like moonlight over my shoulders, I pressed a hand to my chest, feeling the faint stir of my wolf once more. Embers under ice, vulnerable and insistent. The ceremony loomed mere hours away, pack tensions rising like storm clouds, whispers of rogue sightings at the borders, the Alpha's council fractious over alliances with the fractured kingdoms. Would the goddess unveil mercy, or merely the scorn I'd already tasted? My icy blue eyes stung with unshed tears, reflecting the weak glow of a single tallow lamp, sorrow etched deep as winter's first freeze. In the howl outside, I heard my own unspoken plea. See me, choose me, thaw this eternal frost. But as the wind battered the den's hide flap, doubt's seeds took root, and the bond song faded to a fragile, flickering dirge. The dirge of the bond lingered in my den like frost on the walls, a fragile echo that mocked the carvings I'd etched there, crescent moons chasing shadows, symbols of phases I'd hoped would summon light. But as the bruised purple dusk deepened to ink black, the solstice bells tolled on, pulling me from the pallet's meager warmth. Pre-solstice preparations waited for no shattered heart. The pack's rhythm churned relentless, and my healing duties were the thin thread binding me to their fold. I rose, wrapping my cloak tighter against the insidious chill, my slender frame protesting the weight of unspoken dread. The wind outside battered the hide flap like insistent accusations, but I stepped into it, silver blonde hair frosting anew as sleet stung my fair skin. Empathy demanded I serve, even if it amplified the curse they pinned on me. The village stirred in frantic preparation, dens aglow with tallow lamps that flickered like hesitant stars against the encroaching night. Packmates hauled armloads of corded wood to the central pit, their breaths clouding in plumes that spoke of exertion and survival's unyielding grip. I wove through them toward the healer's alcove, a shallow overhang carved into a snowbank, stocked with my meager stores of willow bark and thawed roots, my soft steps swallowed by the drifts. But as I passed, the murmurs swelled, a rustle sharper than the wind. Eclipse girl. Her touch freezes the blood. A young mother veered wide, clutching her pup close, her eyes darting to my hands as if they bore claws instead of salve-stained fingers. Another, a burly hunter binding fresh snares, recoiled when my gaze brushed his, muttering under his breath about omens that thawed the ice we all skated upon. My curse, they called it, the white wolf born under that blood moon eclipse, a rarity that marked me not with purity, but peril. Fragile, ominous, a harbinger of weakness in a pack forged by Blizzard's brutal forge. Their avoidance cut deeper than the sleet, each averted shoulder a reminder of my fringe existence. I busied myself in the alcove, grinding dried elderberries for fever drafts, the pestle's rhythm a dull counterpoint to the ache in my chest. But memories clawed free unbidden, flashbacks to a childhood colder than any winter. The night of my birth, when the moon bled red and black, eclipsing the stars as my mother's cries faded to silence. Father had held me then, his strong arms a fleeting hearth, his voice a rumble against the storm. Lunar veins that warm the void, little one, he'd whispered, tracing the faint white glow under my infant skin, eyes alight with a wonder the pack would soon snuff. Weeks later, the madness took him, howls echoing from the tree line as he vanished into the white wastes, chasing shadows only he could see. Branded shattered by the eclipse's cruel jest, his final words haunted me still. The fire sleeps, Alara. Wait for the king's hand to wake it. I'd clung to that fragment like a talisman, even as the pack's whispers buried it under layers of scorn. Now, with Thorn's dismissal fresh as a wound, those words twisted like thorns. Had Father seen the frailty they all decried, or something more? A gnarled hand clamped my wrist, yanking me from the pestle with surprising steel. I gasped, the mortar clattering to the snow, but the grip was familiar, dry as old bark, yet insistent. Elder Mira, the pack's wizened seer, her face a weathered map of wrinkles etched by countless solstices, eyes cloudy as frozen ponds but sharp with secrets. She rarely surfaced from her burrow den, speaking only in riddles to the Alpha's ear. But now she dragged me into a snow-dusted alcove off the main path, her movements deliberate despite the hunch of age. "A word, child," she rasped, voice papery as wind-scoured leaves, her breath fogging between us like a veil. I hesitated, glancing back at the preparations, the laughter of youths stringing aurora lanterns, the Alpha's enforcers sharpening blades for border rights. But Mira's grip brooked no delay. "Of course, Elder," I murmured, my soft-spoken tone laced with the deference isolation had taught me. She released me only once we were shrouded by the overhang's curve, the wind muffled to a hiss, snowflakes drifting like hesitant confessions. Her eyes, usually veiled, pierced mine with unnerving clarity, as if peering through the frost to the embers beneath. "I knew your father," she began, her whisper barely threading the gale, dropping low as if the trees themselves might eavesdrop. "He was no shattered mind, fleeing shadows. He was the steadiest tracker this pack ever claimed, fierce in the hunt, honorable to the marrow." Her words struck like a sudden thaw, melting the shame I'd carried since childhood, the weight of his branded madness that mirrored my own eclipse taint. All my life, I'd borne it like a cloak of hoarfrost, the pack's averted eyes, the tales of his howls fading into the drifts. To hear this, it tilted the world, cracking the ice of my certainty. "Then what claimed him?" I breathed, voice trembling, my icy blue eyes searching her face as if answers hid in the lines. Mira's gaze darted to the shadows, nervous as a fox scenting hounds, before settling back on me with grim resolve. "His vanishing was no jest of the moon. He delved into old truths, celestial weaves that powerful wolves bury deep, lest they upend thrones." She placed a liver-spotted hand on my arm, her touch firm despite the frailty. channeling a faint warmth that eased the knot in my chest. You have his eyes, girl, and I fear his unyielding heart. That eclipse didn't curse you with frailty, it veiled a gift. Your white wolf slumbers, sealed tight until a true king's touch awakens her fire, a power to mend what blizzards rend, to unite the fractured kingdoms against the shadows gnawing at our borders. The revelation hung between us, a twist sharper than thorns' scorn, not omen, but prophecy. My birth under that blood-veiled moon, the rarity of my form, they weren't chains, but keys to something vast, a lunar legacy tied to alliances the pack could scarcely fathom. But betas like your thorn, she continued, voice dropping to a venom-laced hush, they hoard such truths like misers with coin. Ambitious claws that scratch at Alpha's heels, burying celestial lights to dim threats to their climb. Trust none who wield power without the goddess's full gaze, especially those with flanks guarded by enforcers like Lyra Frost. Her warning coiled cold in my gut, a stark echo of the political undercurrents I'd glimpsed in Thorn's gaze, his casual invocation of Lyra's steel. Mira squeezed my arm once, her cloudy eyes flickering with urgent fire, then shuffled back into the gloom, melting into the tree line like smoke on wind. I stood rooted, her words a balm on the raw edges of despair, yet laced with dread's fresh bite. Not curse, but concealed strength, a dormant blaze waiting for a sovereign's hand. The fractured kingdoms, those splintered realms beyond our borders where rogue wars simmered like under snow fires. Could I be the weave to bind them? The pivot came unbidden, a quiet defiance blooming in my chest like the first crack of spring under permafrost. I knelt by a frozen puddle at the alcove's lip, its surface a mirror of fractured ice. And there, in the weak reflection, my icy blue eyes caught the light. Not sorrow alone, but a faint glow, ethereal as foxfire, hinting at the sealed inferno Mira promised. Embers, not extinction. The bond with Thorn tugged still, a traitorous hum, but now it warred with this spark. Perhaps the goddess wove deeper patterns, testing my gentleness against the pack's cruelty. Empathy had mended elders and beasts, but this could mend worlds. I rose, fair skin flushed not with cold but resolve, the murmurs around me fading to distant static. For the first time, the curse felt like a shroud I might shed. Ceremony. Eve cloaked the village in anticipatory hush as I emerged, the auroras unfurling overhead like mocking veils, ribbons of green and violet dancing across the void, veiling secrets in their shimmer. Packmates converged on the longhouse, scents of spiced mead and pine heavy in the air, laughter brittle as thin ice. I lingered on the fringe, steeling myself for the right, when voices snared me, low and conspiratorial, drifting from a thicket near the enforcers' dens. Thorn's gravel-rough timbre, laced with Lyra's clipped steel. The bond's a trifle, but the Eclipse Girl's frailty? Leverage for the Alpha's ear, claim the enforcer's strength, and we'll bury her whispers before they thaw our bids. Lyra's chuckle, cold as blade on stone. Unite with frost, not winter. The kingdoms fracture, we seize the shards. My breath caught, heart fracturing anew, but Mira's words anchored me, a quiet flame against their scheming gale. The bells tolled final peal, summoning all to the unveiling. I stepped forward, defiance cloaked in gentleness, the auroras swirling like veils of fate. Whatever the goddess unveiled, I would face it not as omen, but as heir to lunar fire. The auroras unfurled like mocking veils as I crossed the threshold of the great longhouse, their ribbons of green and violet bleeding across the ink-black sky, casting ethereal glows through the smoke vents above. The bell's final toll reverberated in my bones, a summons that pulled the pack inward like threads on a loom, weaving us into the rite's unyielding pattern. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Mira's revelation a quiet ember in my chest. Lunar fire veiled, not extinguished, clashing with the chill knot of Thorn's overheard plot. Unite with frost, not winter. The words echoed like wind through cracks, but I pressed on, my soft steps muffled by the packed snow of the entry path, silver blonde hair catching the auroral light like fractured moonlight. Defiance cloaked my gentleness now, a fragile armor against the storm I sensed brewing. Inside, the longhouse thrummed with primal life, a cavern of timber beams hewn from ancient pines, their resinous scent heavy and cloying, mingling with the spiced mead that steamed from communal cauldrons. Hundreds of wolves gathered in human form, their faces upturned and shadowed by the dance of central flames. Bonfires ringed by rune-etched stones, crackling with logs that spat embers like defiant stars. Drums pulsed low and insistent, a heartbeat woven from stretched hides and bone mallets, vibrating through the frost-hardened floor to seep into my veins. The air hung thick, chill-edged despite the heat. Pine smoke laced with the musk of fur-clad bodies, the faint tang of roasted hare from the feast tables. And under it all, the sharp anticipation of revelation, like ozone before a gale. Packmates pressed close, hunters with scarred knuckles, mothers clutching wide-eyed pups, elders murmuring prayers to the moon goddess. Yet I lingered on the fringe, my slender frame a ghost amid the crush, my empathetic aura brushing them like a hesitant breeze, soothing frayed nerves even as they shunned my gaze. The Alpha, grizzled and broad as an ancient oak, mounted the raised dais at the hall's heart, his fur cloak rippling like a banner of unyielding ice. His voice boomed, full of gravel-worn authority, silencing the drums to a hush that fell like fresh powder. Tonight, we honor the goddess. We honor the bond that steels us against the white death. We welcome the future of this pack. His amber eyes swept the throng, pride etching deeper lines into his weathered face before settling on his son, Thorn, standing resolute at his flank, golden gaze scanning the crowd with the calculated poise of one who already tasted power. Thorn Blackwood, step forward. Who does the goddess name as your mate? Your Luna? Time thinned to a blade's edge, every sound magnified, the creak of shifting hides, the distant howl of wind clawing at the eaves, the collective inhale of the pack like a beast drawing breath. Scents sharpened to knives, the sweet burn of mead on tongues, the earthy undernote of anticipation, and there, piercing through it all, Thorn's pine and iron aura, tugging the bond taut in my chest. It hummed alive, a searing blaze that flushed my fair skin despite the chill, swelling my hope like a tide against frost barriers. Mira's words whispered beneath, a true king's touch. But this was the rite, the unveiling. Surely the goddess would affirm what the bond already sang. I edged forward through the press, my icy blue eyes seeking his amid the sea of faces, the auroras filtering through vents to paint us all in ghostly light. Our gazes locked. A white-hot connection flared between us, raw and undeniable, the bond igniting like struck flint on tinder, auroral threads pulling taut, souls recognizing in that endless heartbeat. His pupils widened, golden depths flickering with the same blaze that scorched through me, and for a breath-stealing instant, the longhouse faded. No drums, no scents, no watchful eyes. Just him, seeing me, not the eclipse's frail daughter, but the fire veiled within. Hope surged, thawing the perpetual chill in my veins, my empathetic aura blooming outward in a soft, healing wave that quieted the nearest pup's whimpers. Please. I prayed to a goddess whose mercy felt distant as summer. Let him feel it too. Let this be the weave that binds. A slow pesar, confident smile curved his lips, and he began to walk. The crowd parted before him like snow yielding to a plow, murmurs rippling in his wake. The beta claims his Luna. As my chest swelled with thawing warmth, the Bond song a triumphant melody. He moved with predatory grace, broad shoulders rolling under his midnight cloak, golden eyes fixed on mine, promising the union I'd dreamed of since father's vanishing lullaby. Closer, closer. The air between us crackled, electric with fate's promise. My breath hitched, slender hands trembling at my sides, silver blonde waves framing a face flushed with rare, blooming certainty. But he didn't stop. He strode right past me, his shoulder brushing mine with the indifference of a gale scattering leaves. An impact more bruising than any blow, the Bond shrieking in protest. A silent wail of confusion and betrayal that twisted my gut like a thorned vine. The world tilted, auroras blurring to streaks of mocking color, and I turned, body stiff with disbelief, to watch him halt before Lyra Frost. The enforcer stood tall and unyielding, her warrior's frame clad in steel-trimmed leathers, eyes cold as winter's first freeze, her scent of sharpened iron and unmelting snow a stark counter to my veiled warmth. He took her hand, raising it high like a trophy, and pivoted to face the pack, to face me. His voice, when it came, was not the rumble of a mate's vow. It was the verdict of a judge, glacial and final, slicing through the hush like a blade through hoarfrost. "The goddess has blessed me with unyielding ice," he declared, his gaze pinning mine once more, cruelty glinting in those golden depths like shards under moonlight. Not this eclipse thaw that would flood our strength with frailty. The words landed as a killing frost, each syllable a public evisceration. My white wolf not purity, but peril. My gentleness not gift, but doom to their survival. A collective gasp rippled through the longhouse, but it swelled swiftly to jeers, harsh barks of laughter from the enforcer's corner, murmurs twisting to scorn from the elders' benches. "Eclipse curse," they hissed. "Frail omen unfit for Luna." My aura fractured like hoarfrost under boot. The calm, healing energy I'd poured into the right shattering outward in jagged shards, unable to soothe the wound carving through my soul. The Alpha's brow furrowed, a flicker of unease in his authoritative stance, but Thorn's smile held. Arrogant and unyielding, as Lyra clasped his arm in triumph. The drums stuttered back to life, ragged and mocking, the pack's cheers a roar that drowned my ragged breaths. Heat surged in my veins, not the Bond's blaze but a nauseous churn, bile rising sharp and metallic on my tongue. This was no private dismissal. It was execution by frozen judgment, illusions of worth shattering like thin ice under the weight of their stares. 1,000 pitying, scornful eyes boring into me, the fringe dweller now flayed bare for all to mock. Mira's prophecy curdled in my chest, a true king's touch. But Thorn was beta-born ambition, not sovereign mercy, and in his rejection, he'd condemned the fire he couldn't see. I staggered back, the press of bodies closing like a vice, my fair skin blanching to ghostly pallor as the world spun in auroral haze. A wave of nausea crested, hot and violent, and I shoved through the throng, out the heavy hide doors, into the snow-choked night, collapsing to my knees in the drifts just beyond the threshold. Laughter echoed from the longhouse, a cacophony that chased me like baying hounds, mingling with the wind's howl to form a dirge of my unraveling. Vile tang despair erupted from me, heaving onto the snow in a steaming stain. The acrid burn in my throat, nothing to the gaping void in my chest. Tears froze on my lashes, icy blue eyes blurring the white expanse. My slender frame racked with shudders that had little to do with the cold. Visions flickered then, delirium's cruel gift amid the sensory horror. Flashes of white fire licking at the edges of my sight. Not the curse they'd named, but Mira's promised blaze, untapped, insistent, coiling like auroral serpents in my veins. The Bond shrieked on, a dissonant wail pulling toward the longhouse, but I pushed to my feet, cloak whipping in the gale, and fled into the tree line. Branches clawed at my arms like accusing fingers, snow yielding treacherous underfoot. But I ran, deeper into the shadowed wilds, where the pack's judgment couldn't follow. Exile loomed, not as threat but inevitability, propelling me toward the white abyss. The auroras danced overhead, veils of fate now torn and mocking, as the first true storm of my life gathered force. What fire could thaw this frozen ruin, and would I survive long enough to find it? The tree line swallowed me whole, branches clawing at my cloak like the pack's scorn made manifest. Jagged fingers of pine and birch, their needles frosting my silver blonde hair into a tangled veil. Laughter from the longhouse chased me still, a fading echo warped by the wind into something feral, accusatory, as if the auroras themselves jeered from their mocking dance overhead. My legs burned, slender frame buckling under the weight of shattered illusions, each step a betrayal of the hope I'd harbored like a secret flame. The bond with Thorn throbbed in my chest, a dissonant pulse that pulled me back, even as revulsion propelled me forward, his pine iron scent clinging to the air like a curse I couldn't outrun. Eclipsed Thaw, he'd called me, reducing Mira's veiled gift to frailty, the pack's jeers sealing it as truth. Tears froze on my lashes, blurring the whiteout into a swirling abyss, and I stumbled onward, the blizzard rising to claim what the rejection had left raw. Hypothermia gnawed at my edges, insidious as frostbite's first whisper, a creeping numbness that started in my fingertips and clawed upward, turning my fair skin to mottled porcelain under the cloak's sodden weight. My sealed wolf lay dormant within, a silent weight in my core, her white form uncoiling not in fury, but exhaustion, as if the eclipse that birthed us both had drained her fire to embers long cold. Senses blurred into the whiteout, the wind's howl a relentless dirge, sleet stinging like 1,000 pitying stares, the ground yielding treacherous underfoot, drifts that sucked at my boots one moment, bare ice slick as betrayal the next. Breath came in ragged gasps, clouding before me like fleeting prayers, each inhale laced with the metallic tang of my own unraveling. The perpetual chill I'd always carried deepened now, seeping into my veins like ink through snow, my empathetic aura flickering erratically, reaching for solace in the storm, finding only void. I collapsed against a gnarled trunk, its bark rough as the pack's judgment, bark scraping my palms as I clawed for purchase. The world spun in hallucinatory haze, delirium's cruel mercy amid the gale, visions unfurling like auroral ribbons, not of warmth, but warning. Flashes of untapped power pierced the whiteout, my birth eclipse replayed in shards of crimson and black, the blood moon pulsing not as curse but command, its shadowed corona coiling around me like a siren's embrace. I saw it then, the twist Mira had whispered. My white wolf not frail, but forged in lunar forge, her form commanding storms as father's lullaby promised. Lunar veins that warm the void. In the vision, gales bent to my will, snow devils parting like courtiers before a queen, winds whispering secrets of the fractured kingdoms, their borders bleeding shadows that hungered for unity. My hands, in that fever dream, glowed with ethereal fire. Not the gentle healer's touch, but a blaze that could mend rifts in ice and soul alike. A prophetic gift, sealed until the true king's hand, waiting to thaw what blizzards had wrought. The hallucination shattered as a gust hurled sleet across my face, the cold a slap that yanked me back to gasping reality. My body failed in earnest now, limbs heavy as leaden drifts, the numbness creeping to my core where my wolf whimpered faintly, dormant and distant. "This is the end," a traitorous voice whispered, echoing the pack's murmurs. Eclipse omen, unfit for survival. But beneath the despair, Mira's words kindled. Not curse, but concealed strength. The bond with Thorn tugged still, a frayed thread in the storm, pulling me not toward the longhouse's false warmth, but a desperate clarity. If I was to fade into the white death, let it not be as the frail girl they'd branded, let it be with truth laid bare. Prophetic role or not, perhaps my legacy, veiled fire, lunar weave, could redeem this ruin, force even his ambition to see the power he'd scorned. With a surge born of delirium's edge, I pushed upright, cloak whipping like a tattered banner, and turned back toward the right's distant glow. The wind howled defiance, or perhaps invitation, as I staggered against it, resolve flickering like the vision's afterimage. The thicket near the longhouse loomed through the swirl, a snarl of evergreens shielding secluded paths where enforcers lingered post-right, Thorn among them, no doubt sealing his alliance with Lyra in shadowed whispers. My breaths came shallow, each one a battle against the gnawing cold, but I pressed on, the prophetic glimpses fueling a rally as desperate as it was foolhardy. For legacy's sake, I told myself, echoing Father's vanished promise, for the fire they can't see. The bond guided me, a traitorous beacon now twisted to purpose, until I burst into the thicket's fringe, spotting him, Thorn, broad-shouldered silhouette against a lantern's weak gleam, Lyra's form a steel shadow at his side. They turned as one, her eyes narrowing to slits of winter frost, his golden gaze hardening to the appraisal I'd tasted before. "Thorn," I choked out, voice raw as wind-scoured ice, my slender frame trembling not just from cold, but the weight of bared vulnerability. I stepped forward, ignoring Lyra's low growl, my icy blue eyes locking on his with the same searing blaze from the right, pleading now, laced with the vision's urgent fire. The rejection. It changes nothing of the bond, but hear me, the eclipse isn't frailty. It's a gift, sealed for a purpose. Mira spoke truths. My wolf commands storms, unites what fractures. Your legacy, the pack's future against the shadows encroaching our borders. It could be forged through this, through us. He stared, the silence absolute as the blizzard's heart, his expression shifting from surprise to scoffing disdain, a bark of laughter escaping like shards from a cracking flow. Lyra's hand tightened on her blade hilt, but Thorn waved her back, stepping closer with the lazy arrogance of one who held all cards in the gale. Up close, his pine iron scent overwhelmed, the bond humming traitorously, even as his golden eyes gleamed with mockery. "Delusions of a broken moon," he sneered, voice gravel rough, laced with the same venom that had eviscerated me before the pack. "Prophetic ramblings from an elder's dotage, fit for fireside tales, not thrones. You think your veiled whispers sway ambition? The goddess named strength in Lyra's steel, not some Omega's fever dreams of commanding gales. Legacy? Yours ends in the drifts, Alara, a footnote to my rise." The scoff landed like a claw to the gut, sharper than the wind's bite, his words dismissing Mira's revelation as madness akin to Father's vanishing. Lyra's chuckle slithered in, cold as her namesake, but I held my ground. The vision's white fire flickering at my edges, untapped, insistent, a counterpoint to the numbness claiming my limbs. Empathy, my lifelong tether, twisted now, no longer seeking to soothe, but to resolve. The pack's cruelty, Thorn's ambition, they were fractures I might yet mend, not as Luna, but as the lunar air Mira promised. "It's no delusion," I whispered, voice steadying despite the shiver racking me, fair skin flushed with the spark of defiance. "The kingdoms fracture, shadows stir, your bids for power blind you to the weave that binds them. But I see it, and I'll survive to prove it." Thorn's laugh deepened, dismissive, but a flicker crossed his gaze, uncertainty, or perhaps the bond's insistent tug, before he turned away, Lyra at his flank like a forged extension of his will. "Prove it in the wild, then. The storm calls its own." They melted into the thicket's gloom, leaving me alone with the gale's rising fury, the lantern's light guttering like my fading warmth. Defiance bloomed full then, a quiet resolve uncoiling in my chest like the wolf's first stir, empathy no longer passive balm, but blade-tempered strength. I echoed Mira's words into the wind. Not curse, but gift. A true king's touch awaits. Vowing survival wasn't plea, but pact, my sealed power a flicker against the whiteout's maw. The blizzard howled like a siren's call to the wild, winds parting faintly as if heeding the vision's command, urging me deeper into exile's embrace. Fragility cracked, yielding to the ember of what I might become, not Omega's thaw, but storm's veiled sovereign. With a final glance at the longhouse's distant glow, I turned into the abyss, the gale my unlikely ally, carrying me toward whatever fire the goddess concealed. The thicket's gloom spat me back into the blizzard's maw, thorns scoff echoing like cracking ice in my skull. Delusions of a broken moon, as the wind clawed at my cloak, urging me deeper into the white void. Lyra's steel-laced chuckle lingered, a venomous aftertaste, but the prophetic visions clung fiercer, white fire coiling, untapped and insistent, a counterpoint to the numbness gnawing my limbs. I'd bared my soul's veiled blaze, pleading for Legacy's fragile bridge, only for his ambition to trample it under boot. The bond throbbed on, a traitorous tether yanking at my core, but resolve hardened it now, not plea, but severance. I'll survive to prove it, I'd vowed, Mira's words my anchor against the gale's howl, which twisted like a siren's lure to the wild fringes. Yet as I staggered onward, the storm's fury swelled, sleet turning to horizontal lashes that blurred the tree line into phantoms, my slender frame yielding to the cold's insidious siege. Hypothermia's fingers tightened, but the embers stirred, faint, defiant, whispering of storms I might yet command. He came for me then, a shadow erupting from the thicket's edge, his broad form a blur of midnight fur and feral intent. Thorn's golden eyes blazed, not with the bond's blaze, but rage's inferno, his beta aura swelling dominant and unchained, pine iron scent sharpened to blood metal fury. I'd barely cleared the evergreens when his hand clamped my shoulder, claws half shifted, raking through wool and flesh in a searing arc that tore a gasp from my throat. Pain bloomed hot and immediate, crimson welling to stain the snow at my feet like spilled aurora, the metallic tang blooming on the wind. "You dare slink back with your moon-mad whispers?" he snarled, voice gravel ground to lethal edge, dragging me sideways with brute force that buckled my knees. The world lurched, branches whipping my face as he hauled me deeper into the drifts, away from the longhouse's distant glow. The celebration's muffled drums, a mocking heartbeat, fading to silence. This wasn't scorn's cold dismissal. It was feral unraveling, his composure fracturing under the threat of my unveiled truth. Mira's prophecy, a thorn in his ascent. My white wolf's potential, a shadow on his alliance with Lyra's unyielding steel. He spun me to face him, breath fogging between us like storm clouds, his free hand fisting my cloak to yank me close. Golden eyes boring into mine with monstrous calculation. The bond shrieked, a white-hot wire twisting between us, but he crushed it under his contempt, claws digging deeper into my shoulder, fresh blood trickling warm down my arm to freeze in rivulets. "Legacy?" he hissed, lips curling in a slash of teeth, the ultimatum dropping like a blade through hoarfrost. "Your delusions threaten what I've forged. Perish in the snow you were born to melt, Elara, or crawl back, and I'll ensure the pack watches your blood paint the drifts crimson, flake by frozen flake." The words were a killing frost, each one burrowing to my marrow, echoing the pack's jeers amplified to visceral threat. His shove came swift and brutal, half drag, half hurl, propelling me backward into a steep drift's embrace, the snow yielding like a grave's maw, swallowing my cry as I tumbled, shoulder slamming against hidden ice with a crack that echoed my fracturing resolve. I landed sprawled, wind knocked from my lungs in a plume of frost, the metallic flood of blood pooling beneath me, staining the pristine white to accusatory scarlet. Thorn loomed above on the ridge, silhouette etched against the aurora's mocking veils, his face a mask of pure, calculated contempt. No regret, no flicker of the Bond's song, only the beta's ruthless cull of weakness. He didn't wait for reply. He simply turned, broad back a final wall, vanishing into the thicket's gloom, the storm erasing his tracks like secrets scrubbed clean. I lay there, bruised and broken, the cold, damp snow seeping into my clothes like insidious fingers, the physical agony a mere echo of the soul-deep wound. He'd taken my hope, my name, my place, condemning the veiled fire within to this white abyss, as if my prophetic spark were but a flaw to excise. For a long, aching span, despair washed over me, a heavy tide pulling under. Maybe he's right. Let the storm claim you, as the eclipse claimed mother, father. It would be simple, to surrender, to let numbness claim the throb in my shoulder, the distant howl of wind as my dirge. But then, deep in my core, something shifted, not sorrow's chill, but rage, a pure, searing white flame, untapped and ancient, uncoiling like the vision's promise. My wolf stirred, a faint, insistent pulse against the frost, her dormant form whispering of storms bent to will, not broken by them. How dare he? How dare he decree our fate when the goddess had woven me not as frailty, but forge? This power, sealed for a king's touch, was no mistake. It was mine, lunar-veined and unyielding, with a guttural growl I'd never voiced, feral, raw, my own. I pushed upward, muscles screaming in protest, bloodied hand clutching my torn shoulder. The white flame whispered higher, a ethereal glow flickering at my fingertips, stirring my wolf to partial life. Fur prickling beneath skin, senses sharpening to the storm's secrets. He wanted me perished. Fine, I'd vanish into the wilds. He willed my melt. I'd command the freeze. No longer prey to the pack's code, I'd forge survival on my terms, protect the fire within, thrive where they'd deemed me doomed. My goal simplified, pure as fresh powder. Endure the gale, awaken the blaze, and one day rise so fierce no claw could rend us asunder. I glanced not back toward the longhouse's false hearth, but forward into the lethal storm's heart, defiance my compass. The exile descent claimed me swiftly, the blizzard a living beast that battered my racked form, wounds throbbing with each labored step, cold feasting on the gash like a ravenous shadow. Blood trailed crimson petals in my wake, freezing to brittle crusts that cracked underfoot, my fair skin paling to deathly translucence, silver blonde hair matted with sleet and gore. Senses frayed at the edges, winds roar a ceaseless assault, drifts swallowing my boots to the knee, the metallic reek of my own blood mingling with pine's faint, mocking sweetness. Hypothermia deepened its siege, limbs leaden and numb, my sealed wolf stir fading to whimpers as fever clawed inward, blurring the whiteout into hallucinatory veils. I wandered blind, the tree line yielding to open wastes, rogue howls piercing distant, a low, guttural chorus from the borders, not mere outcasts, but something shadowed, encroaching, like the fractured kingdom's hunger spilling over, teasing threats that gnawed at our fragile peace. Collapse came unbidden, my body betraying in a hollowed den beneath an overhang of wind-sculpted ice, a shallow scar in the drift's flank, its walls glistening like a frozen crypt. I crawled inside, the effort wringing a sob from parched lips, curling fetal on the packed snow as fever dreams seized me. Eclipse shadows wrestled in my mind's eye, the blood moon pulsing crimson black, mother's final cries weaving with father's vanishing howl, their forms dissolving into gales that clawed at my throat. Visions twisted, Mira's prophecy as torment, white fire coiling only to snuff in Thorn's golden scorn, the pack's jeers a blizzard of faces, Lyra's steel blade glinting with my blood. I thrashed, breaths shallow and ragged, black spots dancing like auroral phantoms, the curse they'd named closing in. Frailties thaw, drowning the strong. Tears carved hot paths down my cheeks, freezing to salt-rimmed trails, my empathetic aura fracturing into desperate pleas to the void. Why this isolation? Why seal the flame only to let it gutter? But then, anchoring through the delirium, Father's lullaby surfaced, a fragment from shadowed memory, his voice a rumble against the storm of my birth. Lunar veins that warm the void, little storm. Let the winds carry your fears, the moon will cradle what the cold steals. It wrapped me like a phantom cloak, steadying the fever's tide, pulling me from the abyss's lip. Not end, but forge. The white flame whispered anew, a gentle pulse mending the raw edges of my wound, staunching the blood's flow with ethereal warmth. My wolf stirred stronger, a defiant uncoil in my chest, her form brushing senses awake. The den's chill air scented of damp earth and resilience, the storm outside a symphony to command, not cower from. Tears fell not of sorrow now, but fierce resolve, profound, earth-shattering clarity. From prey's fragile melt to storm-forged survivor, I'd hunt the wild's secrets, hone the veiled power, and rise as the lunar weave Mira promised. No longer the pack's omen, but the blaze to unite what fractured. Distant rogue howls swelled again, layered with an undercurrent of shadow, feral, coordinated, slinking from the borders like the kingdom's encroaching hunger, a subplot of peril teasing the gales. But in that den's hush, anchored by paternal echo, my vow birthed solid. I'd endure, awaken, and one day, the storm would bow. Pushing to my knees, shoulder bandaged in torn cloak, I crawled toward the den's lip, the white flames whisper my light into the abyss. Exile wasn't death, it was Genesis. The den's glacial hush became my cradle and forge, a snow-hollowed sanctuary where the storm's remnants whispered secrets through cracks in the ice. Gusts carrying the faint, acrid bite of distant smoke, the muffled crunch of shifting drifts under lunar pull. Months bled into one another, unmarked by solstice bells or pack howls, only the moon's phases etching tallies on the walls with my dagger's tip. Waxing to full, a silver scythe mocking my exile, then waning to sliver, mirroring the lean hollow of my cheeks. Isolation wrapped me like a second skin, no longer the fringe dweller's chill, but a deliberate shroud, thawing the Omega's fragility into something sharper, storm-attuned. My body, once slender and yielding, forged lean and unbreaking, muscles corded like frozen roots from endless treks, fair skin weathered to a subtle toughness that no longer blanched at sleet's kiss. The perpetual frost in my veins? It bent now, not broke me. I became a whisperer to the gales, reading their moods in the sway of pines, the subtle shift of pressure before a front broke, scents unraveling on the wind like threads of prophecy. Survival was no abstract rite but a daily alchemy, transmuting desperation to lethal grace. I'd learned the wild's lexicon, the subtle press of a hare's paw in muddied snow, the nervous trill of ptarmigan signaling a predator's prowl, the way auroral flickers presaged clear hunts under star-pricked skies. In the beginning, failure was my cruel tutor, snares sprung empty, arrows glancing off hidden bone, my stomach a hollow pit echoing Kaelin's cries in memory's cruel jest. No, not Kaelin. Mine was no pup's burden, but the weight of self alone, the veiled fire Mira promised demanding I feed it first. Hunger sharpened me, inverting the healer's gentle hands to hunters. I moved with silence rivaling shadow, bowstring humming taut as the bond I'd severed, arrows finding throats with swift, clean mercy that the girl from the longhouse would scarce recognize. I'd whisper apologies to the spirits of the fallen, rabbits' warm pelts skinned for cloaks, Squirrels' bones cracked for marrow's scant warmth, a ritual of gratitude laced with grief, father's lullaby resurfacing to fuel the veiled ferocity. Lunar veins that warm the void, little storm, the moon will cradle what the cold steals. Those words, once a child's comfort, now inverted my role. No longer soother of others' pains, but guardian of my own inferno. Emerging power pulses mending gashes with ethereal glows. White fire licking at wounds, knitting flesh without scar, a hint of the storm command she'd prophesied. Yet the true crucible came in fever's grip, weeks into my solitude, when the old shoulder gash, thorn's claw mark, a branded betrayal, festered anew under relentless exposure. I'd pushed too far that dawn, tracking a doe through a squall that turned the world to churning white, the wind's howl a siren's mockery of the pack's jeers. Collapse found me staggering back to the den, body a vessel of fire and frost, shoulder throbbing like a second heart, fever ripping through veins in hallucinatory blizzards that blurred the overhang's lip into an endless maw. I crawled inside, the damp earth floor yielding like a grave's reluctant mercy, curling fetal as shadows wrestled, eclipse phantoms coiling crimson black, mother's dying cries weaving with father's vanishing howls, their forms dissolving into gales that clawed at my throat, dragging me under. Visions assaulted, the longhouse's auroral veils tearing to reveal Thorn's golden scorn, Lyra's steel blade glinting with my blood, the pack's faces a blizzard of jeers. Eclipsed thaw, frail omen, swirling to bury me alive. My sealed wolf thrashed within, dormant no more but trapped, her white form battering against the eclipse's bars, whimpering for release as black spots danced like rogue shadows encroaching the borders. Why this torment? The delirium mocked, fever's tide pulling at my breaths, shallow and ragged, the air thick with the metallic reek of infection and sweat-soured hides. Empathy, my old tether, twisted inward now, reaching not for pack solace, but self's fractured core, pleading with the void. Am I the curse they named, or the weave to mend? Pain crested like a rogue wave, shoulder ablaze that radiated to my chest, visions swimming in hoarfrost fractals. I bit down on my cloak's hem to stifle the scream building, but it tore free, a guttural cry, more beast than woman, shattering the den's silence like ice under hammer. In that raw expulsion, the latent fire kindled, white flame uncoiling from my core, not vision's flicker, but tangible hearth, surging through veins like auroral lightning. It flooded the wound, ethereal warmth cauterizing pus and rot, knitting sinew with pulses that hummed Mira's truth. Sealed until a true king's touch, but stirring now in survival's forge. My body arched, the blaze spreading to limbs, thawing the numbness that had been my prison, birthing an inner fire that chased shadows from mind and flesh alike. The shift came unbidden, partial and fleeting, a firestorm of cracking bone and stretching sinew, pain welcomed as rebirth's blade. My white wolf emerged in glimpses, fur blooming like fresh powder across arms and back, form elongating on all fours within the den's confines, her ethereal glow casting the walls in lunar silver. Senses sharpened to razor's hymn, the drip of melting ice overhead, a crystalline chorus, the heartbeat of a vole, burrowing 20 paces out, thrumming like distant drums, the wind's secrets unfurling, gusts laced with pine resin and something fouler, shadowed incursions slinking from the fractured kingdom's fringes. I held the form mere breaths, wolf's instincts flooding me, nose twitching at the metallic undernote of blood on the breeze, not mine but another's, rogue tainted and hungry. Exhaustion yanked me back to human skin, gasping on the floor, but the change lingered. A quickened pulse, eyes gleaming with faint foxfire in the dim, the perpetual chill banished to a manageable veil. No full awakening, not without the king's fated touch, but this partial thaw marked me reborn. Guardian of hidden moons, the storm whisperer Mira glimpsed, my gentleness now laced with lethal edge. Resilience bloomed from that hearth, intimate and unyielding, as days stretched to weeks of honed vigil. I'd venture from the den at dawn's grudging light, bow slung and dagger sheathed, body lean and attuned, tracking not just prey, but the wild's undercurrents, father's lullaby a mantra fueling the ferocity. Let the winds carry your fears. It inverted me fully. The empath who once soothed elders now mended self with power's pulse, veins thrumming with veiled command, ready to bend gales or fell foes. Prophecy ties wove tighter in quiet hours, visions of fractured kingdoms, their borders bleeding shadows that hungered for lunar unity. My white wolf, the key to bind what war rent asunder. The pack's cruelty? A forge's bellows, tempering Omega to sovereign. Rising peril scented the air, one crisp eve. As I pushed beyond the den's shelter for fresh stores, a warren of caves I'd mapped in fevered cartography, hollows that promised drier respite from the drifts. The wind shifted, carrying not clean pine but rot's underbelly. Rogue incursions, mangy and coordinated, their howls layered with the fractured kingdom's stir. Shadow beasts slinking south, wars brewing in splintered realms where alphas vied like wolves over carrion. My sharpened senses caught it. The acrid musk of feral packs testing borders, not aimless outcasts, but harbingers of invasion. The prophecy's shadow rising to swallow the light I guarded. Heart steady, wolf's partial gift humming in my blood, I scented deeper. Steel-tanged blood from a skirmish trail, the faint ozone of unleashed fury. Peril loomed, not as threat but call. The final confrontation beckoned. My honed skills the blade to meet it, Mira's weave drawing me toward the king's unseen hand. In the den that night, fire's inner hearth crackling soft, I traced the moon's phase on the wall, full and fierce, mirroring my resolve. No longer prey to blizzards or betrayals, I'd venture into the storm's heart, veiled ferocity my shield, the wild's secrets my map. The shadows stirred war, but I'd thaw them with fire's promise. The warren's shadowed maw beckoned like a false hearth, its jagged entrance veiled in hoarfrost that glittered under the moon's unyielding scythe, a full orb mocking the phases I'd tallied in my den, now a relic of solitude's grip. Rising peril had scented my path that eve, rogue incursions thickening the wind's underbelly with rot and iron, their howls a fractured chorus from the kingdom's splintered edges. Wars stirring like under snow fires, hungry for fuel. My honed senses, wolf's partial gift, thrumming in my veins, had drawn me here, bow slung taut across my lean back, dagger a cold promise at my hip. No longer the empath fleeing gales, I'd become their whisperer, lithe frame gliding through drifts with lethal grace, silver blonde hair braided tight against the storm's tug. Father's lullaby fueled the veiled ferocity now. Lunar veins that warm the void. It inverted me fully, gentleness laced with intuition's edge, ready to command what once cowed. The prophecy wove tighter with each step, Mira's truth a beacon against the shadows encroaching, my white wolf the key to bind realms Thorn's ambition would fracture. But peril loomed immediate. The warren's chill air carried not shelter's hush, but the feral musk of outcasts, blizzard mad and ravenous. I crested the final rise, boots crunching soft on crystalline crust, when the ambush erupted, a whirlwind of fangs and frost from the rogue drifts, 3 hulking forms bursting from concealed hollows like specters birthed of the gale. They were no mere wanderers, mangy fur caked in ice, eyes burning with mindless hunger honed by the fractured kingdom's wars, their sense a foul slurry of blood and desperation, harbingers of the shadow threat slinking south, testing borders with coordinated savagery. The largest lunged first, a brute of scarred gray pelt and yellowed sabers, his growl a thunder that vibrated through the snow, claws raking air inches from my throat. Panic's old whisper clawed my gut, Frail Omega eclipsed thaw, but resilience, forged in fever's hearth, drowned it. My partial shift ignited instinctive, a firestorm of sinew and bone, white fur blooming across limbs, form elongating mid-leap, lithe grace turning the blizzard's fury to ally. Empathy twisted to lethal intuition, reading not just their feral rage, but the fractures beneath, the brute's limp from old skirmish, the flanker's hesitation born of starved cunning. I was no healer now. I was Storm's blade. The dance was chaos incarnate, a whirlwind of fangs and frost, where my smaller frame became weapon, agility outpacing their bulk, weaving through swipes like wind through pines. The brute charged again, breath fogging hot and rancid, but I dodged low, partial wolf's senses sharpening to the thunder of his heart, the subtle hitch in his lunge. Empathy's gift inverted, I felt their desperation not as pity, but precision. Lunging under his guard, jaws half shifted to sink fangs into the soft hollow of his throat. Hot copper flooded my maw, his howl choking to gurgle as I tore clean, lithe grace propelling me free before his claws grazed my flank. He crumpled, staining the drifts crimson black, a steaming ruin amid the white. The others rushed in, a blur of matted hides and snapping teeth. The flanker raking my ribs in a searing line that bloomed fire across my side. The third circling with whimpering snarls, their bloodlust warring with cunning's retreat. Pain fueled the rage, white flame pulsing from my core to mend the gash mid-fight. Ethereal warmth knitting flesh even as I whirled. Intuition guiding a slash of claws that eviscerated the flanker's underbelly, his entrails spilling like shadowed secrets onto the snow. The last faltered, eyes widening at the bloodlust in mine, the promise of death from one they'd scented as easy prey. With a final snarling whimper, he broke, fleeing into the gale's embrace, tail low between legs. I collapsed to knees in the crimson drifts, partial shift receding in shuddering waves, bloodied and unyielding, fair skin smeared with gore, silver blonde braids unraveling like thawed threads, icy blue eyes gleaming with the wolf's faint glow. Breaths heaved ragged, the storm's howl a triumphant dirge, but victory tasted of salt and iron, 3 against 1, yet the shadow's encroachment whispered of larger wars, the prophecy's call sharpening to urgency. My veiled power had stirred fiercer, pulses of white fire mending deeper wounds, but exhaustion gnawed, the blizzard's chill seeping back to claim its due. That's when I scented it, a new weave on the wind, cutting through the metallic tang of blood like embers through frost. Powerful, regimented, the ozone crackle of a full pack patrol laced with Alpha's regal thunder. At its head, dominance so immense it pressed physical, a force that bowed the gale itself, ancient, unyielding, the aura of sovereignty born under the moon's sternest gaze. This was no border skirmish. This was the king's tread, his elite vanguard fanning silent through the drifts, paws ghosting snow like specters of judgment. My wolf stirred alert within, not fear but resonance, a faint, insistent tug deeper than Thorn's severed bond, as if the eclipse's seal recognized its key. They closed in, shadows resolving to forms, sleek grays and blacks, eyes aglow with disciplined fire. Encircling my bloodied form against the Warren's maw, I rose unyielding, dagger drawn, lithe frame coiled despite the ache. No submission, only the storm whisperer's defiance. Empathy reading their coiled readiness not as threat, but test. He emerged at their fore, massive black wolf with silver streaks threading his mane like lunar scars, his presence a regal eclipse that stilled the wind's howl to reverent hush. Amber eyes locked on mine, glowing faint with stirred power, piercing through the blizzard's veil to the veiled fire in my core. The bond ignited, not the dissonant twang of betrayal, but a white-hot unity, souls slamming together like auroras clashing in cataclysmic blaze. It surged through me, sealed power shattering its eclipse-forged chains, white flame roaring alive, flooding veins with ethereal hearth that chased exhaustion's chill, my wolf uncoiling full for the first time, pure commanding, her form aching to shift under his gaze. He closed the distance in prowling bounds, massive frame dwarfing mine, yet radiating not conquest, but possession's fierce shelter, his silver-streaked fur enveloping me against the gale as he nuzzled close, warmth bleeding through my gore-slicked hides like dawn's first thaw. The touch was catalyst, his muzzle against my shoulder, where Thorn's scar lingered faint, unleashing the full bond in a surge that buckled my knees. White fire met his ancient frost, unity blooming profound, prophecy fulfilled in flesh and flame, the lunar gift awakening to command not just storms, but fates entwined. His patrol held perimeter, low growls a thunderous guard. But he shifted seamless before me, human form coalescing in moonlight's grace. Tall, broad-shouldered at 6'4", jet black hair tousled damp from the gale, golden amber eyes holding mine with dangerous calm that masked depths scarred by betrayal. Muscles rippled under pale skin etched with elegant strength, his voice emerging deep and rough, a rumble like embers on stone. "You're safe now." The words wrapped me, cracking the isolation's frost, but it was the whisper that bound, leaning close, breath warm against my ear. "You're mine now." Redemption bloomed in that claim, possessive yet redemptive, his betrayal-scarred shell fracturing under the bond's blaze, flashing to the crescent mark on his collarbone, Moon's ancient brand where she'd etched his kingship, now glowing faint in resonance with my eclipse's fire. Kael Ardent, the Ice King of whispered legends, stoic ruler whose hollow core I'd glimpsed in visions, betrayed by kin, mercy forged to liability, saw not frailty, but the weave to mend his fractures. Mutual salvation hummed between us, his protective calm thawing my perpetual chill, my empathetic resilience kindling his guarded flame, the prophecy's hint unfolding. United kingdoms against rising shadows, rogue wars no longer skirmish but realm-shaking tide. His arms encircled me, broad and unyielding, silver-streaked fur cloak draped from his shift enveloping us both, the gale yielding to our shared aura like courtiers to sovereigns. As I thawed in his hold, visions beckoned anew, fractured realms binding under lunar weave, shadows recoiling from white-hot unity, larger battles looming where my storm command and his regal thunder would clash as one. No longer exile's ghost, but queen to the king's flame, empowered hope weaving all themes into this warm, binding close, frozen exile thawed to destiny, resilience's flicker to inferno, the moon goddess testing coldest hearts with warmest bonds. The patrol's howls rose triumphant, but in his whispers echo, mine. The epic stakes unfurled, teasing wars where we'd forge not just survival, but sovereignty. If that heart-pounding twist left you howling for more, Celine's fiery rebirth, the Alpha King's possessive claim, and the shadows lurking on the horizon, don't stop now. Smash that like button if you've ever turned rejection into your ultimate power move, and drop a comment below. Who's your fave second chance mate in Shifter Romance, and why? Thorn who? Team Darien Redemption Arc or straight to the Ice King forever? Hit subscribe and ring the bell for weekly drops of epic werewolf sagas, forbidden bonds, and heroines who claw their way to thrones. Next up, the sequel, Hook You Didn't See Coming, full audiobook teaser in the community tab. What's your prediction for Celine and the King's first clash with the Rogues? Let's chat in the comments. Your pack awaits.